Well, more people have help available and they don't realize it, or they don't want to accept it. There's a kind of a stigma, and dare I say it, especially with men, I suppose, this idea of reaching out for help. They think that it's a sign of weakness. Well, to be perfectly blunt, that's bullshit. It's not. No one considers themselves weak to go to the mechanic, a car mechanic. It's not weak. I don't have car mechanic skills. I'm not, and I don't have dental skills. So not everyone will have psychological skills, and that doesn't mean you're any worse or weaker than anyone else. It just means we can't be great at everything. We all need help with something or other. We need to get over this bullshit because it's killing people. It's killing men particularly. Excuse the language. I hope that's all right. But
no, definitely, yeah.
So I think that's one, and so I think a lot of the time people do. There is someone that's available. A boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, a mate, a colleague, or whatever. It's more often than not, it's us not being willing to reach out and ask for help than the fact that there isn't help available. However, I suppose there are some people who, for whatever reason, either don't have that person available or don't think that person will be able to help. That might be the case. So, and I suppose that's when you might want to go to a professional. Now, I would obviously highly recommend that. I'm a bit biased. That's my life, I suppose, has been helping people professionally with that. But that's also expensive, I suppose. It's geographically difficult sometimes. So it's not necessarily as easily available as we'd like it to be. But there's some great resources online now. There's some great apps. So I suppose just find it wherever you can.
Yeah.
But find it somewhere.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like this would not solve everyone's problems as well, but I'd be very interested to look at whether you've seen what the research on this is, what the people that have the higher levels of the quote unquote depression and anxiety and all these terms as well, is where else in their life is lacking. Is it the job? Is it maybe they've got the friends, but they hate their job and they're not happy in their relationship, or all these other factors as well. It's like, how many of these things coming back to the self do we maybe have control over, but we kind of just have accepted that standard when we should be raising our standards because we're worth more than we're letting happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll answer it first in a slightly different way, but I think it's a really, really important to make because it's something I've been very passionate about sharing for quite a while now, and I don't think it gets enough attention in this area. I mean, this, the whole area of mental health gets a lot more attention these days, which is fantastic. I think it's more of us, we're having this conversation now. We probably wouldn't have had this 5 or 10 years ago. So I think that's really important because the more we talk about it, the easier it is for people to get help. But one thing that doesn't get talked about, and you mentioned depression and anxiety, which are the two big ones. So there's lots of different types of mental health, but they're the most common and most frequent, and so they get the most attention deservedly. But what a lot of people don't realize is that depression isn't one thing. It's talked about as this one type of illness, but it's not. There are different types of, so this is really important because if 5 people here have depression, the answers are not going to be the same because there's different types of depression, different causes. So each of us, each person with depression or anxiety, whatever it is, needs to really understand what's going on first before we can actually find out what the solution is. So, which comes back to your question. There's all sorts of possibilities. There can be significant external factors or factors that are relatively outside of our control, like financial strain, for example, like homelessness, or cost of living. All of these things, we only have limited control. We have some control over those things, and then there are other things over which we have much more control. The type of work we do, the sorts of goals we set ourselves, the extent to which we look after our physical health and well-being. I mean, that's, I think that's actually one of the most underestimated contributors to psychological well-being. People think, or a lot of people think, going to the gym and exercising is a good thing for our bodies, which it is. You get muscle strength, you get cardiovascular fitness, you get flexibility. So all of those things are fantastic, but it's also fantastic for our psychological well-being. Exercise, you probably know this, but exercise is a potent antidepressant. It's a stress buster. And that's something we can all do. Every one of us can. And because I use the term exercise in the broadest possible sense. Many people love going to the gym, but that also has a cost. But you can go for a walk around the park. You can go for a run around the park. You can go for a swim in the ocean. You can ride a bike. There are lots of ways of exercising or moving our bodies that provide a lot of benefits that don't necessarily cost anything or not much at all. You don't need fancy $300 shoes or whatever. I mean, if you can afford it, fantastic. Sure. There's lots of great equipment, etc. So that is, and a lot of people, there are a lot of people who could benefit significantly from relatively simple things like exercising a bit more, eating a bit better, prioritizing sleep, rest, meditation, etc. Again, and a lot of those things don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Again, and the other thing, which many of us could do better, is reaching out, asking help, and fostering and developing our connectedness. Again, dare I say it, blokes tend to be probably a bit poorer at this, but making a bit more effort to keep in touch with friends, to whatever it is, whether it's going to, as I said earlier, going to the pub and having a beer, or going for a cafe and having a coffee, or just going for a walk, round of golf, whatever it might be, it doesn't really matter. Just spending quality time with good people is, again, one of the simplest. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Going for a walk around the park doesn't cost anything.
No.
But it can provide massive, massive benefits.
Yeah.
So I suppose come back. The first thing is really, John, what's the cause of? Is it your work? Is it finances? Is it physical health and well-being? Is it connectedness? And then addressing that as best you can.
Yeah.
Head over to Jordan Checker Podcast to get the full exclusive experience.